I think I'm gonna hang on a sec and let Susie do a couple of numbers for some of these folks. Not switch angles so everyone's in the flow of where we are.
I wanted to touch on two subjects, and I appreciate you asking where we got the majority. The town did a survey. It was sent out. You're correct. 48% of the people who received it responded. And according to organizations that do surveys, and according to the front page of the survey report that our committee did, that's huge that 48% responded to a survey. Actually, the average is 26.5% of the people who receive surveys respond. So that's actually a huge percentage, 48. And I appreciate that you're saying that 51 was against, that there was 27 for, and then 22 unsure. But I don't think you can count the 22% that are unsure in either direction, because they couldn't decide. I mean, I could say that they would. I could say that they prefer to be against.
I was one of those who put, undecided, because, I believe that, there are extremists on both sides,
Right.
and I think both sides lie, and the truth is somewhere in the middle.
But if they're not to be counted, then why was it on the survey?
I didn't say they weren't to be counted, but
You just said that they can be counted either way.
Okay, listen.
okay. Now I'd like to.
Just please. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. There was a study that came out recently, actually a month ago, that compiled statistics for regulatory agencies, and I'm bringing this up because you talked about doing it, having regulations and having them work to protect us. According to that report, Pennsylvania's DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, the Pennsylvania data showed that in 2010, the agency had 84 inspectors. They inspected 8,565 wells, which means that 82,000 wells in Pennsylvania were not inspected that year. 82,000, that's more than 91% of the active wells in Pennsylvania didn't get inspected. And according to what the DEP wants, they say that every active well should get inspected every year, at least once. But 82,000 didn't get inspected. So, that in mind, those numbers are staggering. What's happening is the industry is just too big. The DEPs, the DECs, they can't control this. I'm going to read a quote from a gentleman named Al Appleton, who in the 1990s was the New York Department of Environmental Protection Commissioner and the director of the New York City Water and Sewer Authority. His job was to develop and implement regulations to protect the watershed. He's very popular, actually. People in the DEC and the DEP both respect him. Here's the information. Quote, "There's a basic belief that we have to strike a balance between the need to protect the environment from the consequences of gas fracking and the benefits we can get from abundant natural gas. The question about regulating gas fracking is whether or not the industry will play ball, and all the evidence is that it will not. All the evidence is that the government simply will not have the spine to enforce the kinds of draconian regulations that it would need to protect the environment from highly dangerous activity. We have to face reality that we should ban shale gas fracking in New York, because there is no way that we can stop the environmental consequences from happening. I have some knowledge of what's involved in regulation, and it's not a pretty picture. I could, with the right set of people, sit down and on paper write a set of regulations that supposedly would protect the environment. But I know, as a person who had to create such regulations and make them stick, that there is no way in hell that those regulations would ever be carried out. No government, to my knowledge, is going to be willing to tell a gas fracking industry, you have $15 million well here and you must stop it because there's an environmental violation. No government that I know of is talking about building the size of enforcement staff, the hundreds of people, the inspectors, the on-site managers of concrete quality, the people who would deal with watershed issues and enforce them. Quite frankly, if you're not willing to beat people over the head with a hammer in a regulatory context, the industry will not play ball with you. Anyone who thinks that this industry, Anyone who thinks that this is an industry that intends to adopt a responsible attitude towards being a good neighbor is cordially invited to go over to Pennsylvania and look at what the industry did to the gas fracking legislation that went through the state this year. They essentially steamrollered over home rule. They steamrollered over environmental standards. They basically said, the public be damned. I also look at the way the industry has reacted to the undisputed evidence of environmental misconduct. They have not been a good neighbor. There is no good neighbor policy, no good neighbor philosophy. They are people who have bitterly fought with essentially misleading arguments any attempt to regulate them. A regulatory system cannot work if it is against an industry that refuses to accept obligation to be a good neighbor. This is an industry that grew up used to the privilege of a place in American society, an industry that grew up exempt by Dick Cheney and the federal regulations, an industry that believes that as long as it gets the product out, it is meeting the national interest. An industry that, quite frankly, no one ever got promoted into senior management for being good with the communities or the environment. They only got promoted because they got out the product. Thank you.
Okay, yeah.